So with the launch of Sniper Elite Resistance last month, I thought I'd go back in the franchise around 2 games and go back to Sniper Elite 4. It's most likely the most prominent game and the biggest game in the series, but of course it has been 8 years since it came out, which to be honest has flown by because I remember when it was quite new and I actually wanted to play it then, and like many of the games I have done videos on, I just never got round to it. So here I am finally checking it out. The best way to describe the gameplay of Sniper Elite 4, and probably the main thing that does stand out to me, is just the freedom you have in all the missions. So the campaign is set up into different missions, and although it is just one mission for each section, you could spend a long time just on one mission because it's so big in terms of the map and what you do, and it's so free. The actual presence of what you do is fairly straightforward. It's mainly the main target that you have to kill, but in between that there's different sort of optional things that you can do, and of course you have to take out other people to get to the target. And if you've played any Assassin's Creed game, that's probably the best way to describe it, is that you have the black box missions where it's just so free. You're given a bunch of different opportunities in the mission, and that could be where a path is locked and you have to unlock it in a certain way, but it might just be an optional thing that you can do, otherwise you can go a different route. In other words, it's not a fixed mission, it's not linear, it's very open to the player, and that's the best thing about this game, is that it's mainly down to the player and what they do and how they decide to go about the mission, rather than the actual game's mission itself. Because in simple terms, all it is just taking out targets, which may sound simple and in a way boring to some people, but as soon as you play one mission, you will see how much freedom there is and how much there actually is to do. And the best tips is just to take it slow, don't rush through the game. That's where you will get the best experience. And of course, if you do rush it, you'll probably alert other people. It's always great to go stealthy and not alert anyone. Of course, it's easier said than done, I know. But even when you do, it's never the end of the world. You can easily go back into that stealth mode if you play it right. And it's still fun either way if it is all just guns blazing and there's really no method. It really is just up to the player's play style. Comment down below the best way you like to go about a mission, I really want to know. I don't really have a set method for each one, as you can probably tell by the gameplay. And of course it is my first time playing the game. Another great thing about this sort of gameplay style is that it has insane replayability. Every time you play the mission, it's always different each time because it doesn't have that linear feel to it. You can play it a totally different way, and each time is so different to the last. Because the actual main story is fairly short, around 10 hours, but because it's so easy to replay, it's always great to go back and see how you can do it differently. And at the end of each mission, it will also say what you didn't and what you did do, so you'll see all the stuff you missed, and a lot of the time it is a lot. And even I realise what stuff I missed and realise that there really is so much in just one mission that I didn't even know. In terms of the actual gameplay and the gunplay, which is of course a massive part of the game, although it's called Sniper Elite, and a lot of the time I love using the snipers and the rifles, that's the main aspect, but there's a bunch of other weapons in this game. So you can create your main loadouts, and as you play the game you will unlock more by purchasing them. I'm not going to go through each individual gun, but I think there's around 15 different rifles you can use, but I think around half of them are only in the DLCs, so you're sort of looking at around 7 or 8. But I did sort of find out that when I use one, I sort of get so used to it and stick with it, and when I did my research, a lot of the time people do the same. Of course you can always switch it, but it's sort of the case where one really is the best, and you may get a different style with the others, but they never really come close, and it just makes sense. I mean, everyone's going to use the best one. Then there's secondary weapons of submachine guns or machine guns. There's also rifles and shotguns, as well as launchers. One of my favourites and probably one of the best is the FNAB 43, one of the SMGs. But then again, the standard Tommy gun you get at the start, which you don't have to even purchase, is always great. And again, that means you don't have to unlock it all to have a good time. Your first playthrough with very little guns to switch out and choose is still going to be fine and just as fun. There's also a third weapon that you can have, which is the handguns and the pistols. They are cool to use, and mainly for, of course, close range, and it is quite satisfying because a lot of them are suppressed and they're just so clean when you take someone out with them. Although there's so many weapons that you can choose, it's very clear from the game's world and how they built it up that of course sniping is going to be the best way to play the game. The maps are just great. There's so many different advantage points that you can go to, and just so many different ways of traversing around it to get a good spot to snipe, and you can tell it does sort of push you to even stay away from any enemies enemies and just not have any close range fight. But of course, a secondary weapon is there to do that. The game just clearly wants you to be so independent and just out of the way of any enemy fire. And we can't talk about the gameplay if we're not going to talk about the X-ray kill cam that it has, and definitely a very unique feature of this game that even I knew about before playing it, and I didn't even know that much. And if you don't know what it is, it basically, anytime you get a scoped sniper kill, but also in this game, melees and explosives can do the same. All of those kills will put you into this X-ray kill cam where it just shows the entire body of the target that you've killed and puts it all into very slow-mo speed and shows the pinpoint location on their body that you shot, and it just has this insane animation to it that you can see on the screen, and it is incredibly satisfying each time. Now you can skip it as well, but I think every single time I never skipped it because you can just never get bored of it, and the amount of different animations you can get is insane. They definitely put a lot of detail and work into that, and it's such a standout feature. You know, if you got them in the heart and their heart explodes, or their lung, or their bones crushing, it's just so detailed. And just because I mentioned the melee kills, in terms of them, they're not a massive feature in the game. You aren't really going to be doing it a lot, but if you ever do get that close to someone, a lot of the time for me it's basically when you're hanging from a ledge and you can stealthily take them down without them knowing, basically like in Assassin's Creed. Or you could, you know, crouch up behind them and then take them down. The animation isn't anything crazy. As I said, it's not a massive feature, but it is cool to do when you do get the chance. Another big thing you'll also be utilising in your gameplay is the explosive environments, and you'll definitely see which ones are because it'll have that red highlight onto them. And that's the other thing where it goes into that slow-mo kill cam. And as you can tell by the gameplay, there's a ton of fuel cans and explosive canisters and trucks that you can shoot, and it will cause a massive destruction and then kill other people with that. And it's just a great way to go about your gameplay and really use that in your mission to your benefit, and it's such a destructible environment. It's great. And the actual world and the maps that they built for the foundation of this game is definitely what makes it, and just tie that in with the freedom of your gameplay. It really is like an Assassin's Creed, or maybe like a Hitman, but just with snipers and set in this time, and those games are always my favourite. And just to talk about the story of this game, which is mainly just what sets the foundation for the gameplay and all the missions that you do, I never saw it as a massive deal. Of course, some people may prefer it more, but it's not something that I was really immersed into. It's just so there's a bit of context and backstory to what you're actually doing in the game. So of course it's all set in Italy in 1943, and that's why this world just looks incredible. Of course, Italy is such a great place to have this game, and just the amount of, you know, diversity in the world, and just the colours and how vibrant it looks, the different terrain and the architecture is just incredible. And I think a lot of people can agree that it's probably one of the best settings in the franchise. But you play as Carl Fairburn, which is the main protagonist, part of the Italian resistance, going up against the Nazis. And the main plot is basically him dealing with this Nazi super weapon that you have to sort of take down. And in the lead up to that, but even afterwards, it's mainly him just sabotaging different enemy operations, and of course the assassinations of the high targets. But in the entire story, you sort of discover more of what they're trying to do and realise that they have even bigger plans. I'm not going to say too much more, I don't want a load of spoilers. I wasn't going to spend an entire time on the story, but in other words, the more you play and the more Carl actually goes through the maps, he then realises there's way more they're trying to do and has to stop that as well. And that's also that the Italian resistance can then fight back. So if you love tactical and open world games that just give you so much freedom in your playstyle and how you go about each mission, just like an Assassin's Creed or a Hitman game, then this game definitely does hold up. And of course it did get a lot of praise when it did come out, but because it had been 8 whole years, I just thought it would be great to do an updated video. And I said it before, but there's a bunch of games in 2017 for some reason. I don't know what it was about that year alone, but the games always looked so ahead of their time. And there's not many from this year that look so outdated, so you don't have to worry about how the graphics aren't going to hold up at all. They still look amazing, as well as the gameplay and the movement, etc. But I definitely recommend this game even now, 8 years later, and I had a ton of fun, honestly. And I did complete the story, but I could easily go back and redo it because there's so much I missed. And like I said, it isn't so much the actual story itself, it's just the freedom of the gameplay. So if you did enjoy this video, then let me know by tapping that like button down below. And if you enjoy single player and also multiplayer games as well, then that's what this channel does focus on. I have a ton of playlists on a bunch of games, so you can subscribe to the channel if you'd like to. If you'd like to support me any further, then you can become a member of the channel at either level 1 or 2 to gain access to various perks. Then just tap the join button on the channel. Thank you all for the support and watching until the very end. And that was Sniper Elite 4 in 2025, and bye bye.